You are listening to Talking Star Wars. Hello, Star Wars fans.
I'm Alex,
And I'm Connor.
and today we are going to talk about Star Wars.
Like we do. And today we're going to talk about video games. I've got no preamble other than that.
Yes, so we've done surveys of novels, we've done a survey of almost every piece of visual media that's currently out for Star Wars. We've been spotlighting ongoing comic series. We will continue our novel review. Of course, there's many of those, so that might take us a while. But there are comparatively fewer canon video games in the Disney canon era of Star Wars. As everyone is probably aware, or if you're not, now you can be aware, there were dozens of Star Wars games released in the 90s and early 2000s before the Disney acquisition. There were side scroller shooters, the uh, groundbreaking RPG Knights of the Old Republic, Jedi Starfighter, Jedi Academy. So games of RTSs, first person shooters, third person shooters, games of almost any kind you can imagine. Star Wars was almost a video game genre. Somewhat oversaturated the market, and after Disney's acquisition, they have been far more reserved with licensing the Star Wars intellectual property for video game usage.
For better or worse, I would say.
Yeah, there is no longer a dedicated game studio that just makes Star Wars games, though EA, as a holding company for many video game studios, um, for a long time had exclusive license to make Star Wars games, which they did very little with. And now other game studios are being licensed to do it, such as Ubisoft. Great step up. But all that said, there are a list of video games that are in the current canon of Star Wars, and we want to look at these both as a medium of storytelling, because video games are different, and then just review the current video games that are in canon, how they hold up as works by themselves, and how they fit into the greater overall Star Wars universe. Now, video games are not like books in that pretty much any book you can eventually go find. Some of these video games have been shut down permanently, and every playthrough of a video game, it's an inherently interactive medium, so everyone's experiences might be a little different. But we want to at least mention the ones that exist or have existed and just discuss them to the best of our ability.
Sounds good. And it's a shame that we're in a world now where games can just disappear.
Yeah, not a fan of lost media. Just sort of vexes me in a way. I have a difficult time talking about. So future soapbox episode coming up about lost media. But back to our Star Wars video games here. So the first one we want to talk about is Lego Star Wars.
And would this be the complete saga of the Star Wars story? Because I know there have been multiple Lego Star Wars games.
So there have been several Lego Star Wars games, but most recently they released the Skywalker saga of Lego Star Wars, which covers all 9 movies, as well in a large open world hub-based space exploration side quest filled experience, which was, I mean, I played the whole thing. It took me like 60 hours, like enormous game experience. But the total list of Lego Star Wars games, all of which are considered canon because they're direct adaptations in Lego style
From a certain point of view.
from a certain point of view. So there's the original Lego Star Wars, then there was about the original trilogy, and then there was the complete saga. So the original Lego Star Wars was just episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then the original trilogy 4, 5, 6, and then the complete saga, which was just all remastered those 6. Then they released one for about the Clone Wars, and that one brought in stuff from the first 3 seasons of the Clone Wars TV show, including a whole Bounty Hunters arc. That one I highly enjoyed. So I've played all of these, so I have some specific knowledge. Then there was the weakest Lego Star Wars game about just The Force Awakens, which was released in 2016, just as because it was already being developed before the interregnum in releasing Star Wars games. And then in 2022, there was the Skywalker saga, which is the largest, most complicated, most robust Lego Star Wars game ever released. It updated all of the mechanics, made shooting more satisfying, added thousands of collectibles and side quests and speaking roles, added in-jokes and actually gave dialogue to all of your characters. So, you put Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker in a party together in free roam mode, and they might comment about each other like, who are you? You get funny lines back and forth between all the characters. So, it's a great time.
If you've never ever played a Lego game, it is a toy set brought to life. I played through the prequel trilogy game. I think that was the first,
Yeah,
like you said.
that's the
Yeah,
original 2005. Yeah.
a little bit of that, a little bit of the complete saga. I played the first Batman Lego game, uh, Marvel Avengers Lego games. They are just uh, pure fun and whimsy, and a collector's dream slash nightmare, depending on how much of a completionist you are.
Yeah. So as video games, Lego Star Wars games rely on they're child appropriate. They do with in jokes that only older individuals might understand. They rely on a sort of whimsical slapstick humor. Not always slapstick, but they're definitely more on the humorous end as opposed to serious storytelling.
Mhm.
Like, at one point, instead of getting like a dramatic confrontation between characters where they insult each other, there's a slap fight, or someone throws a fish. There's recurring
Mhm.
jokes where people are throwing fish at each other in the Phantom Menace.
Mhm.
So it definitely relies on whimsy. As far as actual gameplay goes, they're collectathons and sort of adventure. You have levels that you go through. You try to find mini kits that will build little mini versions of Star Wars ships or vehicles. You get studs, which are currency that you spend to buy more characters. Usually, you play through every level at least twice. Once in the story
Mhm.
mode, where you might only have access to, Han Solo and Chewbacca. But then, there's a door that only a Jedi can open. So then later on, you return in free roam mode, and you have Luke Skywalker in your party, and he can now lightsaber down the door and find the secret
Mhm.
stormtrooper hot tub room to get the mini kit that you need.
They're probably games that are best geared towards replayability, and it's for that reason. Same thing with the Batman, where certain characters can do certain things. It is so fun to have to rifle through the characters just so you can get Jar Jar, so that you can get the super jump,
Yeah,
and then switch back to R2D2 to just
yeah,
use his abilities.
sort of like the game style called Metroidvania, like after the
Hmm.
Metroid or Castlevania games, where you need certain abilities to move forward. Except Lego Star Wars is also level based.
Hmm.
So story wise, there's not really anything groundbreaking going on. I find the humor enjoyable, and then the complete saga or the Skywalker saga that was recently released introduced an open world element where you can like go to Mos Eisley and do like not radiant, ambient quests. There's
Hmm.
not an infinite number of quests. Radiant quest systems are not my favorite.
Hmm.
Ambient quests are fine though. Or, oh, Watto lost all of his pod racer pieces. Go over to the junkyard and find them, and then he'll give you a special blue brick that you can
Hmm.
use to a gold brick. So for completionists, the game might be a little like crack or a little frustrating, depending on how you feel. I did 100% the game myself, but
Hmm.
they're enjoyable. They have all. I mean, the Skywalker saga has hundreds of Star Wars characters, so um, as games, they're simple. You're not going to find a lot of like mechanically satisfying things. Some of
Hmm.
the puzzles do get a little complicated, so if you're more of a puzzle person, they're great. The combat itself, you have your lightsaber and you whack people, or you have your gun and you shoot people, or you have your staff and you hit people.
There's not a robust combat system, but if you're coming to a Lego game for combat, you might be in the wrong place.
All right. So I don't want to belabor the point. So as video games, they are enjoyable, whimsical collectathons. As a piece of Star Wars media, it's not really doing anything new. It's
Hmm.
just rehashing stories in an enjoyable format. So it's more for like, that's an interesting way to portray the fight between Jango Fett and Anakin. Uh, and it's like fun. It's like, I want to, in Lego form, go around Mos Eisley or on the temple in Coruscant or ride a speeder through the Judland Wastes. You can do those things. So,
It's a great way to introduce new generations to Star Wars, also.
yeah. And so, if I were going to recommend anyone play the Lego Star Wars games now, the older ones are still eminently playable. The one that has content that's not included in the previous ones would be the Clone Wars, because it
Hmm.
covers the first three seasons of the Clone Wars, and it's still very replayable. It's based your headquarters is a capital ship, and you can fly it around to different planets in the galaxy. Still a good time. They're all still playable, though the older ones might get a little bit controls might be a little more difficult.
Hmm. A little clunky.
All right, so moving on. So that first one was released in 2005. The most recent one was released in 2022. We'll see if they release more Lego Star Wars in the movie. Do we get a Lego Ahsoka? Do we get a Lego Andor?
Lego Mandalorian. Mandalorian video game in general would be great, but
I would love it. If I were going to pick one,
hmm
Lego Mandalorian.
hmm
Inject it into my veins, Connor. All right.
build your own Razor Crest.
I mean, I would already do that. Okay, so that's Lego Star Wars. So looking to our next video game on the list, just going in release order, And this is for things in the current canon after Disney bought Star Wars in 2014. We have Star Wars Commander, which was a mobile strategy game exactly in the style of Clash of Clans.
Mm,
I have not played it. It was made defunct in 2020 after 6 years of hunting for whales to get microtransactions. I
middling
kept,
success.
from what I'm reading about it, you took the place of a mercenary, settling on Tatooine to build a mercenary base and fight off Jabba the Hutt, and potentially ally with either the Rebellion or the Empire. Um, I would guess that the actual story content was relatively light, and it was primarily about, you know, build your soldiers and pay some more money so your base can get attacked sooner by other factions. I don't. Uh, for those who enjoy mobile games, you're perfectly within your rights to spend your money how you would like to. It is not my favorite. The type of mobile game that this was is not my favorite. Can't really say anything more about it because it was shut down.
Same here. I don't play games on my phone. I spend enough time on it as it is without having it turn into a game system as well.
Right. So then let's look at this next one, which saddens me because I never was able to play it at the time. Star Wars Uprising, released in 2015. It was an action RPG set immediately following Palpatine's death, um, released alongside the Aftermath novels, sort of setting up like what happened immediately after the death of Palpatine up to the Battle of Jakku. Um, the answer, so in Star Wars Uprising, it was about the Anawat sector where Hoth is and other planets and Bespin, and how there was um, a general who set up the Iron Blockade, pretending Palpatine was still alive. Uh, it was shut down after only a year and a half after some rapid changes, and it didn't make as much money as I think was necessary. So there were a lot of works that were setting up about Governor Adelhard and General Adelhard and all the things he was doing behind the Iron Blockade, and then it just all sort of died. So
Mm-hmm.
the Purge troopers that are introduced there still appear in Fallen Order, and other items still show up in other pieces. The Anawat sector is still referenced in other media, but I think they were intending for it to be larger and last longer than it did. And so when it was shut down, it left a lot of loose threads hanging.
Mm-hmm.
So it was apparently an action RPG. I have not played this one, and no one can play it anymore. So
Damn.
as a piece of world building, I'm intrigued by this idea of this sector where an Imperial Moff tried to just pretend Palpatine was alive and cling to authority. It's operating the same space, as I said, like that the Alphabet Squadron novels and the Aftermath novels are in, and even where the Mandalorian is, where these Imperial remnants are around. I find that very interesting. And then you see the formation of the New Republic sort of fighting against them. Um, so I can't really speak to it more than that because it does not exist to be played anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone does have any, if you did play Star Wars Uprising in its heyday from 2015 to 2016, drop us a line on either our subreddit or on this episode and let us know what you thought because we would love to hear from people who actually played the game.
Share the memories.
All right, now all the games I'm about to talk about going forward from here are still playable and do exist. So those are our two spots. So we're going to talk about these next two together. Uh, the reboots of Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2.
You want to know my opinion playing the first new Battlefront game?
Yes.
What a piece of junk.
Yeah. So Star Wars Battlefront, the new reboot released in 2015, had no story mode at all. So I don't really have any story to talk about.
And
So
it barely had modes. I mean, I'm an old fogey who enjoys sitting next to someone playing video games on a TV. And you can do that, but you're probably the only two people on the map. And if you want to unlock the fun, you have to be willing to play online and wait in waiting rooms and meet up with strangers and be belittled by children. And just not that's more a complaint about the nature of gaming nowadays, not so much about Star Wars Battlefront. But Star Wars Battlefront didn't do much to sway away from those changes. It looks pretty, but it doesn't have the same feel and flow that the original Battlefronts do. There's my soapbox for now, but that game, I bought it and I sold it to a secondhand party for half of what I got it for the next weekend. So
yeah, so that was Star Wars Battlefront, the original reboot. No story to speak of. You
mhm.
play various iconic, like the Rebel Marksman, and then you can get more iconic characters, but it didn't. unlike any of the other previous Battlefront games, did not have a campaign mode.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, Star Wars Battlefront 2, does have a story and a campaign attached to it, in addition to its still controversial microtransaction loot box riddled
Mm-hmm.
online gameplay, which they eventually reformed, mostly to avoid being too much scrutiny from the EU for
Mm-hmm.
its very blatant gambling mechanics. But we will focus on its gameplay and on its campaign mode because we're all about Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars story and franchise building here. And what's established in the Battlefront 2 campaign is actually very important from a storytelling
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
Unlike any other Battlefront game, I mean, it has new lore. It deals with an important part of the story that isn't really. I mean, it's adapted in books and it's mentioned in certain parts of like the Force Unleashed, where we see the aftermath of the Battle of Jakku. But it's uh, unlike the you know failed testing ground that was the first new Battlefront. Battlefront 2 actually has a story to convey and some opinions that it needs to reclaim.
Yeah, so there's really three parts to the Battlefront 2 campaign, but you start the campaign as in control of Iden Versio, um, who is leader of Inferno Squadron, who is a Black Ops, high skill, Imperial special ops group who specializes in misinformation and assassinating rebels. So you play through the first mission. You'll help lure all of the rebels into the trap at the Battle of Endor, and then you're on the ground at Endor when the Death Star explodes.
Mm-hmm.
So you are one of the frantic groups of Imperial survivors attempting to flee, and then you flee behind the Iron Blockade. You are then forced. Ada Versio and her squad are then ordered to engage in Operation Cinder, as referenced in Mandalorian Season 2, where the Emperor, in a feat of pique and also to draw attention away from Operation Necromancer, orders all surviving Imperial forces to basically destroy glass and otherwise render uninhabitable as many planets as possible. This is also referenced in Alphabet Squadron, where we have former Imperials who did the same. This is a step too far for Iden Versio, who was truly an imperial idealist that believed in the order and stability and didn't see any reason that why are we now destroying, why are we smashing the game board? We're here to protect the game board.
Mm-hmm.
So Iden Versio then defects to the Rebel Alliance, and even though she murdered a lot of rebels and all that, there were a lot of former defected Imperials in the rebellion, now the New Republic. And so as you go through that campaign, I mean, one of her friends then meets Luke Skywalker. She marries one of her former companions, and then the third part of that campaign follows her daughter during the New Republic period, who's being hunted by Kylo Ren, who is searching for Lars Santeca and his map.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for its depiction of Operation Cinder, and then its depiction of the early days of the First Order, we actually have a story worth playing in Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the online gameplay, and as far as the actual gameplay, it's a third-person shooter. You have a variety of special abilities. It's not going to win any awards for innovative gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
but it was playable enough, and I was engaged enough in the story. And when you play someone who's a Jedi, like the couple levels you play as Kylo Ren or Luke Skywalker, you're like, oh, I don't feel threatened by these people who are not Jedi or Sith at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
And that's part of the joy of Battlefront as a franchise, where yeah, that's how it was in the original games too, where the stormtroopers or clone troopers or the droids were just cannon fodder. But it's not to say again that both games aren't pretty looking. They are fantastic representations of the Star Wars universe. All the blaster sounds are very satisfying. Uh, but yeah, it's just that crux of having a story mode and alternative gaming styles, uh, gaming modes to have, so that you can enjoy it with friends and not just people in scary territories.
yeah, but if you're a primarily single player gamer like me, I think if you can pick a Battlefront 2 cheap, still worth playing through the campaign to see Operation Cinder, to play as Luke Skywalker, to see the galaxy in the post Battle of Endor period, and to participate in the Battle of Jakku, which
Mm-hmm.
was sort of the hinge point for the post Imperial point. I mean, seen in the novel Lost Stars, referenced in a lot of other media. You actually get to fight in the Battle of Jakku, and the space combat sections are surprisingly fun, given that we're also going to talk about Star Wars Squadrons, which is all about realistic, maybe not realistic, but detailed space combat.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I did accidentally lie earlier in that the next game we're about to talk about also no longer exists because it's more lost media. It was called Star Wars: Secrets of the Empire. It was a hyper reality experience you could have at Walt Disney World in Orlando or in the uh, Disney Resort in California. I don't. I'm just reading what it was about. So you were recruited by Cassian Andor. You went to go undercover and infiltrate a base on Mustafar, and it doesn't exist anymore because the company went under during the COVID pandemic. So,
Fantastic.
yep. Apparently, this explains why Mustafar has trees.
Okay. I would
Just thought 40 years of ecology. I'm
Yeah.
guessing that's what the answer was.
Yeah. So I can't speak to it. Generally, if something's not broadly accessible, it is a hyper niche thing. Like, oh, you can only go do this VR experience at a place and it has important world building. I'm not generally a fan of having to have both a shared continuity and having media that is very obscurely and hard for general people to get to.
exclusive.
Yeah. So, if anyone ever did go and do Star Wars Secrets of the Empire at one of the Disney studios between 2017 and 2020, let us know. Though if you were there in 2020, I
Maintain safe distance.
I hope you were social distancing at the time. All right. So, the next one is called Vader Immortal. So, this is a standard VR one, and I think this is sort of taking place in the same sort of vein as Secrets of the Empire in that you're also going to Mustafar, who's trying to deliver a package to Darth Vader, who's attempting to resurrect Padme. I'm not really a VR person, so again, this is one that's sort of inaccessible to someone who doesn't have an expensive VR headset. It seems to be more of a tech demo than anything else. So if at some point one of us plays this, we'll let you know. If you have an Oculus Quest, apparently you could play it.
I've only ever used
An Oculus one or two times. It doesn't feel like virtual reality. It feels like I'm wearing floating oven mitts that aren't connected to anything, and they are vaguely responding to my commands. So, kind of like when I had what was that shitty Virtual Boy? Uh, Everything is red, everything looks awful, but it's kind of 3D, right? It's like, it's not quite there yet, but we're getting closer.
All right. Well, we'll stop just crapping all over these
Mhm.
video games that don't exist anymore or these VR games. Potentially more about Vader Immortal in the future. All right. Now, we have 4 more video games to talk about that are currently released and in canon in the Disney period.
Mhm.
3 of which are not mobile games. So, so currently we have 2 games that are kind of the linchpin of the current canon video game Star Wars experience, and that would be Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor.
Mhm.
So, the both following the character of Cal Kestis. So let's talk about them individually, but
Mhm.
then talk about any differences. They are one's a direct sequel to the other,
Mhm.
so and they keep the same story throughout them.
Yeah.
So Fallen Order was perhaps the best Star Wars game released in many years, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah, it's like a polished up, modernized version of Jedi Outcast or your Force Unleashed, where you're commanding this Force user. You develop your Force abilities. You combat various enemies and creatures in your wake. Uh, it's been described as a Soulsborne type game, where I think that just equates to very, very hard pattern based combat with light uh, navigating. What do they call that? Where it's like platforming? Yeah, it's like light platformer as well.
Yeah, I think Jedi Order leans a little bit more into Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor lean more into the platforming than perhaps other games have.
Hmm.
So because there's sort of a puzzle based aspect, but yeah. So from a story perspective, yeah, they follow Order 66 survivor Cal Kestis, who survives as a scrapper to become a teenager, is then found by the Inquisitors and goes on the run. And then Jedi Survivor is set 5 years after that game, where Cal Kestis has become a full Jedi Knight and is attempting to figure out the best way to continue to resist the Empire in an increasingly hostile galaxy.
And they're supposedly making a third because Star Wars loves its trilogies.
Yeah, so it's going to be a trilogy of games, though they have not announced anything. Jedi Survivor just came out last year.
Hmm.
So, as video games, they are both the same genre. They're Metroidvania, again, open exploration, with, again, like I think Souls-like combat, I think they call it. Though both are easier than Dark Souls
Mhm.
or Elden Ring would be. But where you have save points, and if you save, all the enemies respawn in the
Mhm.
area. But you earn experience, and you get more powerful lightsaber abilities. So
Quite a lot of flexibility to adaptability, where across the games you can choose to dual wield or have a double-sided lightsaber, or there's some flexibility in determining how your playstyle will go.
determine which of 67 ponchos that Cal will wear, or in the sequel, what color pants or scarf, or what type of hair or beard he'll be having.
That I
So
enjoy a little bit more than the myriad of ponchos.
I don't know. The ponchos have a special place in people's heart, but I do enjoy being able to give Cal a beard.
Mhm.
All right, so uh, I think mechanically, Jedi Survivor advances a little bit from Fallen Order, which was kind of the first game of its kind. I enjoy both, but there's less like super precise platforming necessary in Jedi
Mhm.
Survivor. You have more tools, and it's more about exploration than like there are some platforming challenges you can do in
Mhm.
certain optional challenge areas, but nothing like some of the really complicated platforming you have to do in Fallen Order to get
Sure.
from area to area. Most of the I would say Survivor is a little bit less grindy than Fallen Order is. You don't really have to revisit areas to kill people, and you have two very large hub planets to go to.
Mhm.
And Jedi Survivor also introduces a companion system where there are a couple of companion characters who can follow you around and actually interact with Cal and the environment.
Any other kinds of new features you'd like to see in the third game?
I would like just more story content. Give me
Mhm.
more conversation between characters. Give me more collectibles.
Mhm.
Cal has psychometry. He's one of the first characters introduced other than Quinlan Voss, and so you get a lot of your codex entries and flavor about the
Mhm.
world by Cal finding an object and selecting it and hearing the
Mhm.
last moments or the experience that someone who held the object had. It's a great um, ludonarrative integration rather than
Mhm.
having some dissonance of like, oh, just codex entry. Cal can actually see this with the
Mhm.
Force, so it all takes place in universe, and so information that he gains and sees from like interacting with objects, you see as the player. I very much enjoy that.
Mhm.
We also see Cal struggling with the dark side throughout the whole series. He's worried about becoming an Inquisitor. He's worried about falling to the dark side. He has very few people to rely on. So leading into his very human journey has
Mhm.
been very interesting. So more of that. His relationship with Marin, the Night Sister, is also um, mature and engaging, and I'd like to see them portray how does an adult Jedi deal with
Mhm.
a relationship in that way. So just more of all that, please.
Excellent. Yeah, it's I mean, they are doing well to balance story, gameplay, allowing you to play as a Jedi, introducing new aspects or bolstering aspects that are new, like the Inquisitors or the Night Sisters. Uh, One great thing about Disney Star Wars is that they are trying to tie together these loose threads where I feel like sometimes to the detriment of the George Lucas movies, there's this desire to introduce new, and then you start to lose the identity of the brand a little bit.
Yeah, so Fallen Order certainly leans into exploring the Inquisitors more. It's introduced in
Mhm.
Star Wars Rebels, making them credible, why they would be credible threats to um, surviving Jedi Padawans. Explores the guilt that a survivor of Order 66 would feel, how a Jedi Padawan's teachings would adapt to a modern world, and
Mhm.
how this purge trooper situation, and we also the early rebellion. We meet Saw Gerrera. He's engaged in guerrilla campaign against the Empire on Kashyyyk. So all of that we see in Fallen Order, and then Jedi Survivor shows what should the goals of a resistance against the Empire be? Should it be about preserving the truth? Should it be about fighting back and freeing people? Where do people's loyalties lie? What's the most effective way to resist? Engaging in that question in the same way that um, Andor does, and also acknowledges the existence of the High Republic period in
Mm.
that the planet that most of Jedi Survivor takes place on had a High Republic Jedi installation on it, and so integrates with that world building as well without it being overwhelming. So
Nice. Maybe I know it won't be in the same era, but it'd be nice to get some more connections in the next game, whether that be with Thrawn or that be with the first hints of what's going to happen with the New Republic. Uh, Hopefully, showing where Cal is, what Cal's doing, because he's not in the movies. But like Ahsoka Tano, could have just been busy.
So that is probably the two most. If you had to pick, I'll do this at the end. But which games you should play if you want all the story. But these two are two of them.
Mhm.
So the next game to talk about would be Star Wars Squadrons, which came out in 2020.
The one I've not heard of. This is a real game
Yes.
with a disc or a digital download.
Yep. From Steam, where I played
Okay.
it. So, and it's a little bit more niche in its gameplay. It's 100% Starfighter combat.
Mhm.
It did not get it released during the COVID pandemic. It did not get a ton of post-release support.
Sure.
So it doesn't have, I think, a currently very vibrant competitive scene for people who are into that kind of thing. But it has a story mode where you transfer between a rebel squadron, who you're in an X-wing or an A-wing or a Y-wing, where you can customize your blaster type and your engine type and your shield type and what type of astromech you have. With then also you play half the campaign from the perspective of Titan Squadron, a Imperial squadron
Mhm.
as part of an Imperial remnant. And for the campaign revolves primarily around the Starhawk, which is a experimental rebel flagship, where it has an incredibly powerful tractor beam capable of pulling out of the sky and grappling onto a Star Destroyer. It's a Star Destroyer killer against the Imperial remnant.
Mhm.
And so the campaign, uh, it's a little some dissonance. So sometimes you are hoping for victory for the rebels or the New Republic. Now, of course,
Mhm.
they keep catching themselves. They're like, we're rebels. I mean, New Republic. And then there's some people like the Imperial Remnant. It's like, no, we're the Empire.
Mhm.
So you take them from both perspectives, and some of your antagonists on the Imperial side are other Imperial Remnants who don't acknowledge the authority of Rey Sloane, Grand
Mhm.
Admiral Rey Sloane, as she calls herself, who is now trying to seize control of large swathes of the surviving Imperial forces before the Battle of Jakku. So this it takes place over a relatively short period of time. The campaign does, and yeah, you get Hera Syndulla. She's your ultimate commanding officer in the Rebel campaign, and Rey Sloane is your ultimate commanding officer, all leading up to the Battle of Jakku. So this is Hera during the same period as an Alphabet Squadron, and this is Rey Sloane leading up to before she's exiled in the aftermath and goes to the unknown regions. So, and you see the overconfidence of the Imperial forces, like we destroyed the one Starhawk, not realizing that we saved the planes for the Starhawk, and 3 more of them are
Mhm.
gonna actually achieve victory here at the Battle of Jakku. So, you gameplay wise, it's first person view in a starfighter. I think you can toggle a third person view as well, but you're like
Mhm.
toggling your shield energy, your weapons energy, your engine energy, customizing your attachments, launching weapons. There's some gameplay modes that are just sort of like capture the point, go destroy the frigate, that kind of thing. But the story mode um, is short, but I enjoyed it. It's an interesting experience to be in a TIE fighter with no shields. So
Mhm.
like I'm gonna put all my power to the engines right now.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's Star Wars Squadrons. Very different in genre than anything else we've discussed today.
How does it compare to the older Rogue Squadron, Imperial Squadron games?
Well, I enjoy those too, the
Mhm.
Legends one of Rogue Squadron and so on. If you like those, you like Squadrons. It doesn't have like the mixed vehicle combat. You're not in an AT-AT or an
Mhm.
ATST. You're entirely in space or atmosphere. But I mean, it's the same genre. It's
Mhm.
just modernized to be more like an Ace Combat, I think, where you have more direct tools, more customization. The graphics are better.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, the campaign is relatively short but enjoyable. And again, it suffers from like many games for me. Like Rogue Squadron didn't have a multiplayer.
Mhm.
Squadrons was built around, okay, how are we going to also make a competitive multiplayer mode? And I'm like, I just give me more story content, please.
Yes,
But
more than I could do in the game. Yeah,
yeah,
but it sounds like fun. And again, it's the game that was totally off my radar, so it's interesting to learn about. But then, does that leave us with one more?
yeah. There's currently one more Star Wars game released. There's one more coming out, which is Star Wars Outlaws, which is going to be released by Ubisoft later
Mhm.
this year in 2024. But one that came out last year is Star Wars Hunters in 2023. That is a third-person multiplayer shooter for mobile devices, set between the Return of the Jedi and the Force Awakens. I have not played it. It looks like a gacha-esque game. You
Mhm.
collect your heroes and you send them on. You battle other people's collection of heroes, and yeah, it's not my genre, and it doesn't appear that it's doing any particularly interesting world building. If anyone has played it and it does have any cool lore tidbits, let me know. Maybe
Mhm.
I can manage to get my phone to download it. But
Mhm.
currently, yeah, I just want to acknowledge that it exists, but I don't think it's exactly doing groundbreaking work in the Star Wars story
Mhm.
world.
Yeah, that I have nothing nice to
Yeah,
say about mobile games. So.
I mean, I'd love to talk more in a broad context. I'd
Mhm.
love to have more types of Star Wars games. Like
Sure.
all of these are so aggressive about monetization.
Mhm.
Even, I mean, with the exception of Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, which are like we're releasing and here's a whole game,
Yeah.
and Squadrons releasing here's a whole game. All the rest are like, how can we squeeze as much money out of Star Wars
Mhm.
fans as possible? Buy this skin for your Chewbacca. Get this extra blaster camo pattern for your E11.
You really want Han Solo's gun, don't you?
Yeah, don't you want
Yeah.
that model of the DL-44?
Mhm.
So that exhausts me.
Yeah.
I want to see like where's a Star Wars visual novel where you play an Imperial interrogator having to
Mhm.
navigate their loyalties? Um, where's the Star Wars RPG like KOTOR where you play a Jedi during the High Republic
Mhm.
and customize your lightsaber and grow up with the Jedi Temple? Where's the just apparently canceled Mandalorian bounty hunter game where you
Yeah.
get in a ship and you fly around and do bounties, kind of
Mhm.
like Starfield, but an actual good game. I
They
want
yeah they have Outlaws, which is going to act in that realm of Star Wars, but you don't have a lightsaber, which Mandalorian would have been a perfect way to explore. But now they have, you know, Ubisoft is Ubisoft. They have a female protagonist that people are upset about. I
oh
just want a good game, and I we had an opportunity to get one like that set on Coruscant called Star Wars 1313, all about a young Boba Fett, and that got just tanked.
yeah. So personally, I feel like video games are an
Hmm.
underutilized medium for Star Wars. Interactive media. You don't have. You can have stories that can expand on the lore without having to like be like Force Awakens, where it gives you one. You have one choice in the whole game, and then it changes it. I'm like,
Hmm.
no spoilers, but the Force Awakens or Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order, you just play through the story. It's not like KOTOR where you have choices.
Yeah.
You are the character of Cal Kestis, and the story unfolds and is canon. So you can do more stuff like that. Just I want more anything Star Wars as long as it's quality. Like give me
Yeah.
another RTS where we're playing as the First Order trying to conquer a planet, or then we're playing as the droid Gatra trying to assimilate a city. I don't.
Hmm.
I mean, a resource management game where we're trying to up trade tariffs on Chandrilla.
Hmm.
I'd play that. Papers,
Yeah.
Please was a game. Give me Papers, Please, but set on Chandrilla. I'll be a New Republic functionary. I
Yeah.
don't care.
Give me a Sabak mobile game, Sabak from Solo. Just yeah, just more variety, more uh, diversity in our Star Wars gaming portfolio.
Yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2, except you're Lando Calrissian playing
Hmm.
Sabacc in a seedy space bar.
Hmm.
Sorry, a cantina. Yeah. So overall, I feel Star Wars would be. So we have some great games. Like, give me
Hmm.
more things like Fallen Order. Squadrons was experimental. I would take a Squadrons 2.
Hmm.
But overall, if I would pick the four current canon video games that, if you are interested in the lore and want to understand more about the world and more about Star Wars, that you should play: the campaign of Battlefront 2, both Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, and Squadrons.
I would recommend the Lego games because those are fun.
Oh yeah, and if you want to have
Hmm.
actual fun with a well-made video game, I would echo those four above. Though probably the weakest mechanically would be Battlefront 2.
Hmm.
But I mean, if you're looking for the pure fun of joy of Star Wars, like I would like to be a blockade runner fighting against First Order Tie fighters, and then collect a bunch of studs to go buy a droid,
Hmm.
and then I just want to I want to make everyone in the world gonk droids with mustaches. Go play Lego Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when we get to our a future episode on legends-based video games, our answer might not change as far as what's if you want a fun Star Wars experience, where will you turn to? Lego Star Wars is definitely where that is at. But we'll see. We will talk about those legends-based games in a future episode.
All right. Well, that's our take on the current canon video games in Star Wars. There's also another forthcoming one called Star Wars Eclipse. Not sure what that's about yet. Doesn't
Mhm.
have a release date. So as more Star Wars games are released, we will talk about them, and then at some point we will do probably a couple episodes about all the Legends games. Can't talk about all of them probably because there were dozens, but at least hitting
Hmm.
the high points. Anything that's still worth playing, and anything we'd like brought back into canon.
Yeah. And I also don't have an Atari, so I don't think we'd be able to play half of them.
Connor, you're the person to go to if I needed an emulator for something.
Well, I didn't want to use that legal gray water term on a podcast.
Theoretically. All right. Well, thanks for listening to our take on Star Wars video games. Go play Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor right now, and we'll wait till you get back.
Until then. We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.